everybody. How you doing? Welcome. Welcome to the Star Seeds and Lightworkers Collective here on Quantum Portals. And this evening, tonight, we have an amazing guest, Miss Silver Dyer, who is known as the Rogue Yogi. Yeah. And we are going to be talking with her about a great many things. And we are going to really learn a lot tonight because a lot of times when we think about life coaches, we think about it, I think, from the perspective of, helping us with our work. And it's fine. It's That's a part of it. It's about helping us with our work and other parts of our life. But often I think that that kind of life coach can also be someone that just takes care of just the basics. And what's interesting about the Rogue Yogi is that she is also looking at the spiritual aspect. And she's putting into practice a lot of the stuff that brings in the spiritual with the practical. So that's really, really cool. And I think that many people can learn a lot about that. Even if you don't have a life coach, tonight we are going to be learning a lot of tips and tricks about how Silver became the Rogue Yogi, and also some tips on how we can live our best life ever. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you the Rogue Yogi, Silver. Hi, Silver. How are you doing?
Hi everybody. Thank you, Crystal. I'm doing awesome. And I'm very excited to talk about anything and everything.
Sure. Okay, so but you know what? Let's have like a quick introduction. So, just a little bit about what you do right now. Like, what are you about?
What am I about? So I use the word God because it's recognizable. I am not religious. I also honor everyone's belief and non-belief. So please know if I do say God, I actually don't call God in my head, but you guys will know what I'm speaking of. And I love that prime consciousness we know as many names more than anything in my life. And I've been very connected to that presence since I was born. And through all of the rock bottoms and confusion and fear, I've ended up here with the true honor of helping women to remember themselves. It's like a spectrum, really, of divine remembrance. And this word is thrown around a lot, and that's empowerment. But it's true. Everything I teach is experiential and grounded in practical exercises that I have learned from my guides and my higher self, and from also from the process of getting sober, and from working with as many women who I have, most of them being some level of an empath, most of them being aware that there's something greater out there to tap into. And I can help them through these practical exercises. These can become habits that can grow and form into your character so that you are living in the same life, but as a different person.
Oh, that's really interesting. So, when I what I understand is that you've been having, how should I say, empathic or spiritual experiences since you've been a young girl. I think it's not something that just sort of happened just recently. Can you tell us a little bit about, like, how you started? So I guess your childhood, you had a lot of experiences growing up. Did you want to sort of walk us through that?
Yeah, my childhood was crazy.
Okay.
So I was born out the gate clairvoyant. And for anyone who may not know that term, it's called clear seeing is the real translation, but it's being able to see, really see into other dimensions. So I see many things, beings, angels, grid lines, um, puffs of time passaging, um, deceased loved ones, extraterrestrials of all sorts. And this has been happening, like I said, since I was born. And I would say that my parents are absolutely loving, but they are very traditionally Catholic. And as an only child, my only resources growing up were the church and my parents. And around 3, when I started really collecting memories, like, I have so many memories since that age. But I'd go into my parents' room at night crying, telling them this was going on or that was going on. Maybe there was a portal that had replaced my the headboard of my bed, or one night there were 2 beings who were observing me and communicating, and I was pretending to be asleep. And I would run into my parents' room crying. And by kindergarten, I understood that my top priority for survival and for acceptance was never to speak of this to anyone. So when you put that together with what I was learning in my church, and the church I grew up in was ferocious. Not all churches are. I happened to be in one that was. And for example, and I want to get into this for anyone who is maybe awakening and seeing or experiencing some multidimensional experiences. When I was small, a lot of what happened was preserved as a memory that was kind of an overlay to keep things simple. So, for example, I had this archangels when I was small. To make it simple, they were just simply large, vivid, neon, gem-toned rectangles, a rectangle, not scary. I could identify it, but I didn't know what they were. And one of them was opaque. I could not see through it. It was very slow and followed me directly, just like was always just a little bit above and behind me. And with, my imagination, which was wild, like a rabid stallion, and learning about concepts like the devil and not being allowed to talk about it, I grew up thinking that the devil was following me. And again, this is what I put together, because for some reason I was really bad and I didn't understand why. And I believed I wouldn't have said this word back then, but recruited. And so I was terrified, and I was also already like morally shaken, thinking, what have I done? What's wrong with me? And all of this fear and negation and my own imagination, honestly, it calcified into me believing as if it was a fact, because that's what was reflected back to me, that I was unlovable. And that's how I launched into life.
Wow. Okay, that's really intense. But at the same time, I can also sense that a lot of people feel that way. I think that when I look at some of the guests we've had on the show in the past, especially people who have been lifetime experiencers, which is what I would also call you as well, a lifetime experiencer, because you've had a lot of experiences with the paranormal and with extraterrestrial beings, as you're pointing out. It's hard sometimes because we are coming up we grew up, especially being an only child, growing up and not really having any resources, not having anybody to really talk to, not being able to sort of, it's one thing to sort of be here now and say, oh, but you can go on YouTube and find videos and find all this kind of information. And growing up in the 70s, 80s, you didn't have that, 90s as well. So it was very, very lonely to have nobody to really sort of fall back on, and maybe a bit of literature here and there, but nothing really like it is now. So to you and to a lot of other people, I applaud all of you, especially you, Silver, for having the bravery to go through all of that. Because a lot of us who are on this channel have gone through that. A lot of us have had this sort of baptism by fire, by being on fire, and so I'm sure a lot of people can totally resonate with that. So you came out of the gate with this whole with a lot of your how should I say, abilities being right on fire, like boom, you were able to do all this sort of stuff.
Bottom up.
Brought them up. So what happened now, like I guess in your teens, early 20s, what was happening? Because that's one thing as a child, because as a child it's sort of hard to sort of make sense of what's happening. But by the time you're a teenager, early 20s, what was happening in your life at that point?
As a teenager, I really spent most of my energy trying to forcibly ignore the other world that I see. And now, hear and experience and in all the ways that one can. But back then it was primarily through sight. I really did. I spent most of my energy, in geography class, pretending like, okay, don't look, don't move, but both the walls of the classroom look like the top of a swimming pool. And that's the kind of thing I would say that was my life, because it was 24/7 and it was two worlds on top of each other. And one of them wasn't supposed to exist. The only time I ever spoke up about it was senior year in high school, when I took my mom aside and I very privately asked her, which actually turned into begging, but I was like, please, can you take me to the eye doctor? That was the only time I ever referenced it. And when I got to college, I found alcohol and I was done.
Okay.
I dove off a cliff straight into alcoholism. It helped me feel like I thought other people felt on the inside. And I drank that way for 5 years and was like 90 pounds. And my flatmate, her father was a doctor, and he came to visit my flatmate and immediately called my parents and was like, Silver is visibly yellow, which means your liver
Yeah.
is malfunctioning and very malnourished, and as a doctor, etc. And having to get sober ended me up in a very unexpected place, because no one knew anything about me. I had been intentionally camouflaging since kindergarten. And now there's this term I've heard, masking, for say autistic people or people with anything that they feel is an imbalance that they want to hide.
Exactly.
And I was like, yes, that's the word. I mean, because it's exhausting. And my life up until this point where I had gotten sober was out of the movies, insane. The stories I could tell you, I just kept magnetizing these absolutely absurd events, because on the inside, I was in such turmoil, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I thought I was a goner. And there are things like I fell off a cliff the first day of mountaineering. I was taken hostage by a fundamentalist horse wrangler. The stories like that, I have so many. And so every time something like that would happen, it would reinforce I am bad, broken, and assuredly unlovable. And getting sober, I thought, well, maybe this is it. Maybe this will finally allow me to feel like I want to feel, or feel like it looked like other people felt. I didn't really know. I didn't know what was normal, because everyone else's lives seemed so beautifully uncomplicated. But I actually fell into a recovery group that was a cult. And I did not know that. At that time, I was so naive and so sick and so desperate. And this group has been like written about in Newsweek, and it was extremely emotionally abusive, which again echoed the reception I had from my parents, from my church and God. This is in my mind. And I finally see maybe this is a way out. And it ends up being incredibly, incredibly abusive. And actually, you had asked me this earlier, but that landing in that group, that's where I actually met my husband. And that relationship was beyond abusive. But I was so absolutely used to being treated in such a way that it all blended seamlessly together. And it really, looking backwards, I thought, well, this is the life that I deserve, all of these things having happened. And what actually broke me free was the divorce. And I guess you could say I was so desperate to keep anyone, this man wanted to marry me. When looking back, I knew he didn't even like me very much. But this was the beginning of my stomping down my intuition. So while I was drinking, there was no connection. There was no sight. It felt like relief, but then I knew it was killing me. I got sober, but then I fell into this continued stream of abuse. And knowing this about my husband, even before we walked down the aisle, in order to stay in that house and stay in my body, I really did have to forcibly shut down any connection and any awareness. And right before the truth came out, my best friend leaned over and said, Susan, she called me Susan. She said, you look homeless. And I thought, this is my best outfit. I was a husk of a person. Like, the games we would play, kindergarten, MASH, or I couldn't even tell you my favorite color, my favorite food, nothing. I really was a dead woman walking. And the truth of my marriage, to find out it was premeditated and fraudulent and involved so many other just heart-shattering elements beyond the day-to-day lifestyle I led, which is insane. Not like being allowed to be on the same floor as your partner of the house. I had really come to think of myself as a cockroach. But when all of this came out, and I came to a full understanding of what had happened, because I actually found written journals. If it wasn't for those written journals, I wouldn't have believed it, none of it. And so I am so grateful for them. And the first thing I knew I had to do was forgive him, or I wasn't going to make it. I knew that. The rage and the shame, all of it, it was going to consume me.
Okay.
So that was what I did for 4 years post separation. The only thing I did was try to eat and try to forgive. And I've actually broken down that process, into like a recipe. But after 4 years, and it was like nothing. Like, God, are you there? Why? Why? I pray all day long, 24 hours a day. I am seeking forgiveness, please. 4 years silence, and then a light switch. I don't know why it happened that way, but it did. And I was able to see my ex-husband with complete compassion. Like, my heart broke for him. And when that happened, I had thought, yes, like, I'm as clairvoyant as they come. Like, I've never heard of anyone else, I've never heard of anyone else recounting being in ships and being with different races and being, I'd never heard of anything like that. But when I forgave, there was an avalanche in my abilities that actually illuminated every single possible way of interpreting multidimensional communication. And it was actually such a force that during this time, I had a bit of a breakdown, because I could hold my arm up like this and, see directly through it to the door. I was seeing, beings I didn't know yet, as if they were standing right in front of me. And one time, at one point, I opened the door just to look at my son before going to bed. And he was sleeping peacefully in the lap of an incredibly imposing, muscular African-American man, like this. And the man was, he immediately gave me warrior energy, and he was so calm. But what got me, because something, our hearts are much quicker to discern threat than our minds.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's huge
That's
for
big,
anyone
yeah. Most
wanting
rock
to
centered,
deepen
yeah.
their intuition. If you're getting pushback from your mind after an initial moment of calm, that calm moment is the truth. Your ego and our personalities will then sometimes kick in with the fear. But he looked at me, but he didn't smile. And the human silver was not prepared for that. I would have expected a smile, and I was terrified. I ran away. This whole time, I actually had the thought form of this 14 years of, I don't want to go into detail in case my children ever watch this, but the thought form of these 14 years together was visible, clear as day, and hunkered in the corner of my living room. It never moved, but it was massive. And it appeared to me much like a blurry, like pole drawn monster, like tumbleweed with a singular eye. And every night I had to be down there waiting for my kids to go to sleep, trying to watch television, and ignoring this like small car-sized thought form that would literally just be looking at me. And another night, I heard a thunder crack, and then I heard pouring water, and I didn't know what that was. And it was just, in the wake of this avalanche here. And I was terrified, but I made myself run upstairs. And I think the sheer force of like all of these colliding dimensions and beings who were helping me, but I was just like out of my mind with fear. My toilet had split in half. And it was like if you had a Star Wars lightsaber and split my toilet in half, and it had fallen like that. And the water was just gushing out into the hallway. And I was like, what is this? At that point, I was like, what do I take from this? Because is this a threat? Am I doing something wrong? Like, it was a whole nother coming of age through that same fear of my childhood. And it took me years of training and teaching to have consistency with it, to understand it, to be able to, in the moment, interpret all of that. It took a long time. And you know what really saved me? I had already been using Vipassana meditation at that time for about 15 years. And it's now been like 24 years that I've been meditating. And many of my experiences, they started during meditation. So that has always been like my Doctor Who's TARDIS. I actually have a huge copper pyramid in my meditation room, which is right behind here. And it's like my saving grounding grace. And that's where I always go to inquire and to self-reflect and be comforted, honestly.
Wow. That's wow, there's a lot going on there. And I'm so sorry that you had to go through all of that. I mean, that's just that's really heavy. And you know, why should anybody go through that, But at the same time, like I've mentioned before, you'd be surprised how a lot of people who are energy workers, who are healers, who work with different dimensions have gone through that. And especially when you said the word breakdown, I said, oh yeah, been there, done that. Got the T-shirt. A lot of us have been down that path. Like, it seems to be a type of initiation, the crucible by which we are forged, and then we're sent out into the world. Now, it's also something that I've heard before where people, like I said before, there's no understanding as to what's going on. And so you're seeing all these beings, you're seeing all these portals and all that kind of stuff. And you're like, what the hell's going on here? And what have I done? And it takes a credible amount of strength to, especially growing up and thinking that you're not worthy, you're a cockroach, you're not worth of love and all that. So many of us have gone that path, unfortunately. And also the part of substance abuse. And, look, I just wanted to sort of put a disclaimer here. If you are going through any kind of substance abuse, seek help, please. Make sure that you seek help. But this, by the same token, having substance abuse is something that is very common because it's a way for us, for people who are empaths or people who are enlightened to go, they have to go through all that. They go through the bottom of the bottom and then they work their way up. So when you mentioned that, it was like, yeah, it's unfortunate, but that it seems to be, that is where a lot of people end up, getting a lot of their life lessons. Now, so it's clear when you were in college, your early years, you entered into a marriage that didn't, obviously was not serving you, your highest purpose, but at the same time, it allowed you to find compassion for this man. And, I'll leave it at that because I don't want to trigger people. I don't want anybody to be triggered by that because there's a lot of intense experiences that you went through. So, it's unfortunate that you went through that, but again, you're brave for having worked through that. Now, once you divorced and you were moving on with your life, did you at that point, because when you were, I guess at college, I don't know if you studied, I don't know, in psychology or working as a life coach, when did you start to look at becoming a life coach? Is this just after your divorce? Can you sort of give us a bit of a timeline as to when was this happening?
Yeah. And I do want to also say that really quickly, at the heart of my process of forgiveness, which it did take 4 years, but Wayne Dyer, who he has spoken of this too, but that's actually at the heart of my forgiveness recipe is that I bowed to my ex-husband in thanks and gratitude for shaping me into the person I am now. And what you are referencing, these dark nights of the soul, I've had so many. And until I had a near-death experience, I really begrudged them. I thought this is not normal. The amount and variety of dark nights of the soul that I've experienced is absolutely something I have never seen ever, not in anyone. And in my recovery group, there were, 400 to 500 people, nothing. And I really begrudged that. I thought, why? Why is this particular
Yeah, why me?
dark night soul like? Why is this like my 10th? And that's the beauty of those. They really are almost like divine surgeries, helping us get to where we need to emotionally evolve to, helping us especially in ways that we don't feel we're capable. I don't know if I ever could have divorced him. And I honestly think that how it happened, it was divinely orchestrated and divinely timed. God helped me do what I could not. And out of all of the dark nights of the soul that I've experienced, besides my near-death experience, that one absolutely transformed my entire being.
Okay.
And having been in recovery at that point for maybe 18 years, I had been helping women, 16 women at a time, sometimes, on a daily basis. And I was helping them with practical, spiritual problem solving. And I was honestly drawing a ton from my own life and from my own lessons because I have been keeping a running journal since I was in first grade. And then there was, during my marriage, I stopped. But then, no, actually, that's not accurate. Actually, there were only a few years in my marriage when I stopped because I always wanted to, I knew I always needed to capture every event, every exchange, every experience that happened to me. I was like, I need to have this because honestly, it was kind of who I was. And even though it would be like, I could easily be institutionalized were I to explain or try to explain so many of my experiences. They're simply not believable to most everybody. And by the way, if we end up talking about something that anyone in your audience struggles to believe, I absolutely give you all my grace because I don't know that I would believe me either.
Okay.
So please just know that. But
Mm-hmm.
that forgiveness changed my life. And it was so powerful. It was all I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
I had already wanted to become a meditation teacher, but unfortunately, I, as you know, it's hard to make a living.
Yeah.
Uh, it's not like India where they, if they're studying with somebody,
Like a guru or
they,
something, that kind of thing.
they right, they provide for their teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Like um, the teacher always has a place to sleep and food, and it's different.
Mm-hmm.
Here, we think of tipping maybe, and dropping a $5 bill in a jar or something. So, I wasn't able to set aside my desk job as a writer and become just wholesale meditation teacher, but it's what I did on
Yeah.
my own every day, deepening my connection, deepening my skills. Um, I spent about 4 years in depth with a teacher to just kind of solidify all of the different like co-created languages through vision, through sensation, through hearing, um, through data drops, all of it. And it's hard to talk about because so many times things come in all these different ways at the same time. And it took a really long time to be able to be like, so far, I mean, like, I still don't understand so many things that have happened, exactly how that works. But I initiated myself out of fear after the near death experience.
Mm-hmm.
And the level of compassion that I found myself capable of once having forgiven him, it was it. I was like, this is what I'm here for. And the first time I channeled my higher self, the very, very first time, and for anyone out there who is like looking at their life, being like, why is my life an absurd cartoon? Like, why? Why? I want to offer this. Um, I channeled my higher self for the first time, having no idea what to expect. And one of the first, if not the first things that she explained to me, she showed me a picture of like a glass, smooth, black mountain lake. I love the mountains more than anything. And she explained how so much of my suffering was from this continual masking, camouflaging, I used to call it,
Mm-hmm.
from the camouflaging of who and what I really was. And that looking backwards at all of the hellscapes I had climbed up and out of, I was suffering so much from trying to outrun them and somehow forget them. And that was both not possible and it was divinely intended.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw an image of a Rolodex, and she explained to me, you are meant to hold everything that you have been through. And I won't go through all of it, but
Yeah.
there's pretty much no category of trauma that I've not experienced. And I mean that truly without any exaggeration.
Mm-hmm.
I take this really seriously. But she said, you are strong enough, and it is, your will, like meaning our will,
Mm-hmm.
capital S, Silver's will,
Mm-hmm.
that you are living embodiment of the entire spectrum of human experience, so that whenever any woman comes to you, you can dip down
Mm-hmm.
into that lake
Got it.
and you can pull
Mm-hmm.
a matching experience out to reflect
Yeah.
and to comfort and to not be speaking out of my neck
Mm-hmm.
and share experientially lived and thus tested, I guess you could say,
Survived.
solution.
Yeah, you've survived so much. That's really, really powerful. Now, you mentioned a couple of times that you had a near death experience. So I'd like to sort of ask you if you could tell us how old you were when you had your near death experience. And then, if possible, because you've been through a lot, like you said, and I get it now, how you're able to take from your experience and to share with people and how they can, and in that sense, I guess, would you say in that sense this is how you're able to help people? Because it is, because you're able to sort of, like you said, not talk out of your neck and give real examples. So I'd like to know if you could tell us what age you were when you had your near death experience, and I guess at this point, where were you at what age when you started becoming a life coach? Like, how did that start, becoming a life coach? Because obviously, like I said at the beginning, a life coach is, you meet with someone and you sort of tell them a couple of things and there you go. But you've taken it to the next level because you have all this experience, you have this Rolodex that you are. When did it start, and how did you evolve into the rogue yogi, I guess, at that point? So,
Sure. Yeah,
near death
it's
experience.
like that. It all happened on a dime after awakening from a near death experience.
Okay.
Um, I'll go through that really quickly if
Yeah,
you'd like.
sure.
It's awesome.
Okay.
Uh, so I knew I was dying. I had chronic Lyme disease,
Okay.
and my friends have been telling me for months, you're dying, don't you see? And I understood what they were saying, but I guess I just knew every day they told me, I knew it wasn't going to be that day. So I was doing everything I could to heal and to find, oh my goodness. I mean, everything. I saw just a million of doctors. I had a port and like wore a fanny pack every day with antibiotics going through me, and it just became it became more and more. I would be partially paralyzed, and then that paralysis would move, and the pain was like, before the end, I gotten to the point where I couldn't even use my walker. And I remember one day I kind of rolled off the couch and I army crawled over to the kitchen, and I had everything for me in the cupboard on the bottom floor, and I would make 6 PB&Js laying on the floor, and I would line them up along the kitchen so the kids wouldn't step in them, but they knew they had their day's worth of food, and they would come and go as they needed and take a sandwich. And so I'd had paper plates and I'd line them up every morning, 6 PB&Js, and then I remember my parents walking in, and you know I cannot imagine. Actually, I can't, because my father was very honest with me later on. I was 40 at this point, and my dad I remember him coming in and just yelling at me, like, I was laying down on the kitchen. She's like, "Your boys deserve better," and just crumbling. I was like, I know, but I don't, like, can somebody help me? Like, I don't know what, I mean, begging my guides, begging God, begging my ancestors, Archangel Raphael, Archangel Ariel, like, just doing everything on earth and spiritually that I could, and knowing I was just tanking. And one night, I don't know how my friends it must have been intuitive, because actually I did have a friend who I eventually met who grew up from, the crib, clairaudient. So she became a good friend of mine. And this one night she would not leave. And I just remember laying there on the couch with my head in her lap, being like, can you please leave? Because I knew it was the night. And my kids were safely at their dad's. I'd been to the ER earlier that day with my dad, and, you know, they were just like, your heart rate's tacky. We can't help you. And I just was like, at that point, when she finally left, I started crawling upstairs, like, doing my crab crawl, because I had a walker that I would use if I ever had to go to the house, or I was downstairs when I could walk. And then I had a cane for upstairs when I could walk. And I was halfway up the stairs, and I will never forget this. I saw this with my third eye. I didn't see it like you like usually do, like out here, but I was just concentrating on, like, I was so excited to get to my bed, because I knew I had done everything possible to stay. And that included, I was like, if I go up those stairs without calling, my dad was nearby. He was up here. And I made myself call him at 10 p.m. That was the last thing I knew. If I did that, we'd have a brief conversation. It would probably go like I thought, and then I could go to bed, and then I could go home. And I knew that I could do so with a clear conscience. All of a sudden, like I saw and felt a spitball, literally, like when you were a kid in lunch, do it with your straw, and you'd be like, psh, and like the little straw wrapper like hit me on the head, and I stopped, and I was like, what? And my guides, they said, Susan, you have one more chance. Get to bed. You have to get out of your body and get help. And immediately, I was like, wait. This is like the story of my life. I do this still. I'm like, but I was like, but I can't like astral travel on command. I don't know how to, I can't, I've never done that. I can't just like, because I've astral traveled my whole life, but I've always just done it. It's not been like, I am going to astral travel tonight.
It's going to happen to you, I guess, right?
Yes. It felt so much safer. I actually severed my hara line, and I have like a peg leg hara line now, that if you could see it, it's like a triangle. It's like a cobalt blue triangle that connects me to the earth from Archangel Michael, who, by the way, was the devil that was following me my childhood, trying to keep me rooted through that root chakra, because I had severed that line. And I was like, okay. So I climbed up the stairs. I'm like, and I kept saying, you guys, I have no idea. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, what? I kept saying that. And then I was climbing up the little steps to my bed, and they said, lay on okay, they showed it to me. So I'll just say it. Like, they had me lay, if this is the edge of my bed, they had me lay on my side, right? Like if I sneezed, I would fall off the bed, but they had me lay in a straight line on the very edge of my bed. And then they communicated, I'm just going to say it as if it's just too hard to, but that halfway, like imagine a dial, like at the 50% mark with the needle there, roll out of my body. I was like, okay. I mean, I was like, okay. I had no idea like what was going to happen, or like, what does help mean? I remember thinking, like, I literally thought this. I was like, I guess I'll try to find like an angel, like some angel somewhere. Like I don't see anything in here right now. I don't know. Like,
So you're
What
out of
does
your
one
body
do?
at this point? Is so at this point you've
No,
rolled
no,
out of
not
your
yet.
body?
When
Okay.
it was in my bed and
Mm-hmm.
I was going to sleep, I was trying to think, strategize, like, well, how do I get help? Like, where do I go? I don't.
Okay.
So I rolled out and immediately, and this brought me right back to so many things linked me
Mm-hmm.
back to childhood. And my name Silver, it comes from this and my other near-death experience in 2022. So I saw portals all the time as a child that terrified me
Mm-hmm.
because I assumed I could see they were tunnels, different colors, different times. I always assumed it meant something was coming for me. And they were always by the head of my bed. The moment I came out of my body, there was right there where one of my childhood portals would have been. But this was again like a coal black swirling portal. And I remember thinking, like, did you guys give me the wrong portal? Like, this does not look good. You know what I'm saying? I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I didn't put it together at the time, but it looked a lot like the the um the thought form of my marriage, that leftover energy in our house. And I just remember standing there astrally, being like, seriously, you want me to go in there? Like at this point, I was still like a little child afraid of the dark. And like the portal that pops up looks like it's drawn with coal. And I was like, oh my God. I was terrified.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was moving faster than light. And that was something I'd never seen before. So I think that kind of distracted me. The sheer speed of it. I was like, this is not like exactly like the portals when I was a kid. Those swirled kind of gently and like they were always beautifully colored. Looks like I'm taking like it would be like a jet or something. I mean, I can't explain to you how fast it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being nervous. It would rip me apart. So I remember angling my body astrally, like to go with the flow, like as thin as I could, because I was afraid it was going to like shatter me or something. Boom, I'm out. And I'm floating in like wet black velvet. No light, no sound, no sensation, no frequency, no vibration, no feeling of sentience, nothing. And being as afraid of the dark as I was, I immediately said, God, please take me somewhere safe and good. And before, and I obviously didn't say this, I didn't have mouth, but
Mm-hmm.
I thought spoke it. And before I enunciated the G in God,
Mm-hmm.
I was completely immersed in that prime consciousness.
Wow.
It was like, and then bam, I'm floating. I'm like aware of my astral body again because in the other place I honestly felt like I had nothing. I had no form, but I was just like a little baseball in there. Like, what? You know, so boom, safe and good. God presented to me
Mm-hmm.
as um innumerable blazing, blazing. Like again, I remember this way better than I do yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
in detail. And I remember thinking, if I was actually in my body, I'd be like a fry. I would fry.
Mm-hmm.
Like the rays were of all shades of gold, and they were so blazing. And I immediately knew. I mean, at that time, I'd be like, I immediately knew I was literally in God. And of course, like I'm like, light, God's not like thunderbolting me. I'm here, like, and like the the feeling of what God is made of. I don't believe it's possible to experience here because of the necessary degree of separation we have to incarnate. And I know, probably everyone in your group, like, we do remember more than most, but remember I told you I used to see through my arm?
Yeah.
Like, I still, like, Silver still needs to buy into this dimension enough so that I can sit on this couch. We're here for a purpose. So there's always going to be, we're never going to experience, in my opinion, that state of one, of union, of, I don't even want to say this phrase. It makes me shudder because it's just unconditional love. I feel like that's a bumper sticker somewhere, I'm sure. You know what I'm saying? But that is truly how powerful it was. I have not even ever experienced like human, like genuine love. So to go from like that to to what is God, it was just shocking. And we had a quick exchange. And the first thing God asked was, do you want to stay or go? And I went into full-blown panic because, like with many of the people in my past, I thought, what if God doesn't believe me? Because no one, it's weird. I never spoke about my stuff, but even still, people have never tended to believe me. It's just, I'm sure more of that mirroring, but I thought, oh my God, God's not going to believe me. And what if he keeps me? And so I threw up this IMAX size photo of my two boys. And I said, no, God, I need to go back. I need to go back. I was saying, like, I need to help raise them. They need me to balance the energy of their father, and I was like, I have to prove it to God through action. That's how how people say like love is like a doing word. I was like, I have to really show God I'm serious. So I started hand over hand, like trying to self-tow back to my body. Like, I don't like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm doing this like frantically. Like, no, I'm really serious. I want to go back. And I'm thinking, I don't know where I am. Like, I I could be like in my bedroom. I could be in another universe. I could be in a place I can't even conceive of. And I'm sitting here yanking on my silver cord. Like,
But you're trying
what?
though. But you're trying in a way. I mean, it's
Yeah,
very riveting, but at the same time, it's a little bit of humor in there because I mean, here you are trying to pull on this cord, and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just gonna do my best. But like, I mean, I would think that any mother would say, my kids. That is already going to be like, I can't leave my kids behind. You know what I mean? Sometimes they do if there's I guess lessons to be learned. But I totally get that. So like, I mean, I mean, if we're going to see the humor in any of this, I mean, that's humorous that you're sort of pulling
funny.
on this cord. It's funny.
It's ridiculous. Like, I'm like, what? Like, I look back, I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, God's just not gonna believe you, Susan. Like, and then we continued our exchange once it was like, okay. And I thought before this experience that God was an an energy, a creative energy that was a loving creative energy. But what I actually got from our exchange going forward was something that when I came to, I actually doubted as sacrilegious, which I'll get into that. But God and I had this exchange, and a couple things stick out. And one of them I never get to say because people don't let me publish it. And so I would like to say it if it's
Sure.
okay.
Absolutely.
Um, the exact words that I had the blessing of experiencing and thinking to myself were, I could have just killed 10 people and I would be received in the exact same way.
Wow. Okay. I can see why some people might be a little kind of like, because if someone's what is it? Someone's a serial killer, they're going to be
Exactly.
accepted, or someone's Hitler, that kind of stuff.
Yes,
But
exactly.
you know what?
And the
We're
most
not
simple,
here to, I guess, put a judgment on that. I mean, because I don't want to get into a whole fight with people and okay,
no,
that
no,
kind of thing
no, I don't
exactly.
wish
But
to do
but I
that
get what you're
either.
saying. I get what you're saying.
I
Be,
think
you know,
I've spoken on this before, and the way something a metaphor that tends to be more palatable is if you think of a great big bushy oak tree
mm-hmm,
and it's hot and it's summer. I use this example sometimes. If somebody like Hitler
mm-hmm,
came to stand under that tree for shade, the tree would not recoil
yeah,
its branches.
got it.
Just like if Mother Teresa came to stand under that tree for shade, the tree would not fluff up its leaves.
Mm-hmm,
But that was the second most shocking thing
okay.
that I experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got the boot over to Jesus. And I was like, Jesus? Because I had long ago divorced from my organized religion because in my heart, I knew I was already doomed and going to hell.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, we're just floating there. And I'm just floating, just like kind of bobbing, floating. And there's Jesus floating, looking like, and I remember thinking this too, being like, Jesus, I'm like, oh yeah, come on. Like, you're like white rich people, Jesus. Come on. And he's like glowing. He's got like
Mm-hmm.
light brown hair. It's like so hot. He's got blue eyes,
Yeah.
like crisp, like cream linens, totally, totally Caucasian,
Mm-hmm.
uh, well, perfectly manicured, respectable beard. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my God, no, you don't look like that. What is happening? What is
Well, it's how
this?
you grow up with it, all right? Like
But that's the
that's the
thing. It's
thing.
like
It'll
if
reflect
it
back to you.
exactly. And I may not have resonated with a different being.
Oh,
If
okay. Exactly.
Jesus
Exactly.
showed up
Mm-hmm.
as he really was,
Mm-hmm.
I might be like, oh, are you like sane? Or I don't know, I could have been scared, or I could have
Yeah.
been, it
Exactly.
made it just really clear.
Mm-hmm.
And it's ironic because I mostly see ascended masters and angels. I rarely see them as the anthropomorphized version. I actually usually see them as these huge, like ceiling high core ovals of a core color. And then an ascended master I would see as having thin colored rings. And like I know the colors, I know the ovals, I know
Mm-hmm.
everything. But this time everyone went on to make it really clear this is Jesus. And Jesus said to me, and I didn't know this, but my ex-boyfriend told me this. Jesus said something like this to somebody at sleeping by a well, but Jesus said to me, and he had held his palms out like this, and he was floating. And I didn't say anything. I was just thinking all these like sarcastic things, which again, I'm like, really? Can you be a little grateful? But he he said, "Do you want to get better?" That's exactly what he said. And then I found out later there's a part in the Bible where he asked a man if he wanted to get better, and the man like walked again. And so he said that, and I was filled with joy. And I remember like all of a sudden my remembrance like truly kicked in. And I was like, oh, this is Jesus. This is like my best friend. And I grabbed his hand and we started through like all these beautiful greens. And green is often associated with the heart chakra, often associated with Archangel Raphael, the healer. So this is all a co-creation here, and we're all co-creating everything at every moment. So just in case like anyone's looking for their synchronicity, like you're bird watching, just know that we're actually co-creating them as we go. So get on in there, by the way.
Yeah.
But so just flying, like so happy. And then he asked, "Is there anywhere else you want to go?" And I said, "Yes." And boom, we were there. I never tell him. I have one of my guides whom I call Perry. I know that he doesn't exist, that I know that he's a light being. But I knew if I could get to growing up my entire life, I've been going back and forth to a ship that is, sorry, captained by the Mantis race.
Okay.
And I've always had the same Mantis caretaker since I can remember. And so I named him at that age. And because I was always sitting on a table with him, I was like 3. So I named him Table, obviously not his name, but that doesn't matter at all to any being anywhere, by the way. It's like an organizationally convenient thing for us, but they could care less. Love is kind of like the connection. It's not a name, but I still call him Table.
Sure.
And I knew if I got to Table's ship, much in the way, if you guys have seen that movie Contact or read the book by Carl Sagan, the book is so much better. I knew that Perry could, on that ship, somehow, whatever, take form, and I could hug him. So, like, when Jesus was like, "Is there anywhere else you'd like to go?" I was like, "Yes!" And then, it's like, there is no time. It's just, everything's instantaneous. And he showed me the hall, and it was like a small, this kind of being-sized hall. I don't know how many different sized holes this ship has, but this one was like a kind of like a people-sized opening or whatever. But and I looked at the symbology next to it to verify, like, yes, this is a correct ship. And boom, I was in it. And I guess the way my mind co-created this was I was suddenly in like a 1960s, like in their prime. I'm like the biggest sci-fi nerd, obviously, ever in the world. I was in this like 1960s amazing NASA gift store. And I was like, where's Perry? Where's Perry? And I saw him. And it was just like in that movie Contact. He looked literally identical to my father, like down to the label of his dorky, like, I don't even know what kind of shoes they are, but like dorky dad shoes. But his face was different. But it was a face of somebody, just like another Caucasian man who could be my father, like whatever. I knew that was Perry, but there was like another guest in the gift shop talking to them. And I was like, are you serious right now? It was so sarcastic this whole time. so strange, but I was like, um, I am like here on borrowed time. But the gift shop was so amazing. So I just was like entranced looking at these keychains. I was like, oh, I want to buy all of these keychains. But I kept watching. Finally, I think obviously that was a moment to like let me adapt and like reorient. And he became available. Perry became available. And so I ran up to him and I was like, oh, have good manners, and I was like, hello. And it just was like this thing where I was just like bursting, like when I was with Jesus and when I was with God, like, but I didn't feel like it was appropriate to just fling myself on him. And I remember him saying, would you like to work here part-time? And I was like, I would love to. And it's so crazy because I've been going there my whole life, exchanging and role playing and doing all of this work my entire life. I don't know why that was the conversation, but it was just that I got to be with Perry viscerally.
Mm-hmm.
And
So,
I hugged him at the end. And I was like, this is what I wanted.
oh, that's
This is,
nice. So,
yeah.
so you had this near death experience. It seems very, very vivid. So when you came back, I assume you came back into your body at a certain point.
I
Did
woke
you
up right after that.
you woke up right after that? So
You're
after
hugging
that
him.
experience, and you said that it really
Yeah.
changed you. When did you start actually working as an actual life coach? Like
The
when
next
did
day.
so moving forward? When did that actually start to? Did you call yourself a life coach back then, or did you just sort of and like who are your early customers? How did you
Yep.
actually get this whole business started? And when and what finally led you to become the Rogue Yogi?
So, oh my gosh. The one thing that God the one thing that I said I felt sacrilegious that I came to the realization of. So when I woke up, it was a knowing, and I absolutely, absolutely know this may sound uh, egoic, but please understand, I mean this for myself and for you, Crystal, and for literally every soul incarnated on earth. I understood during the last part of our exchange that I had plugged in to what I was. I realized that I slash every single human actually is God. And right before he gave me the boot over to Jesus, he asked me to promise to do my worst fear, my worst lifelong fear come true. And I promised word for word. I said, and I was like so disheartened. But I was trying to be like I wasn't, because I was like, that how rude are you being right now? But I was like, oh my God, my life is going to go down the toilet. Like I'm going to lose everybody. But I said, I promise I will return and live transparently. And that was the direct promise I made to God. And when I came to, it was like such joy. Like I looked at my cane, I was like, I literally patted it and like hopped out of bed. My blood was clean. I was fully mobile, no pain, no paralysis, done. But I was like, oh my God, I'm about to lose everyone, which I did. um, which was its own sort of new kind of dark night of the soul, because I knew the people I'd grown up with, the I was like, you want me to talk about the things, like the only thing that has allowed me to have friends and a home. I kept thinking I was gonna get kicked out and be homeless as a kid. Um, and I committed to it. And so that is when I was like, I need a teacher. Like, I have to have all of this. Like, this can no longer be like this process I've been journaling at that point since first grade. Like, this needs to be something that I have full uh, confidence in and competency. Because the one thing I knew was true, even as scared as I was, is why would God give me this circus like gift just, for giggles? Like, there has to be a reason why I live in a screensaver. I mean, do you know what I'm saying? And so I was like, okay, well, I need to do some work. I mean, I can't, what am I going to do? Like, just, I had no idea what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the whole point. That morning, like, I sat up in bed and I said, okay, God, I'm going to do it. And I said, but you have to I said this while hadn't gotten out of bed yet, but I already knew I could like jump out of bed. And like, I already knew that. But before I did that, I was like, you have to promise me that you will show me exactly what next to do. Cause I had no idea, like at all. I was like, what does this mean?
Mm-hmm.
Live transparently. Like what? So, okay, I get you want me to speak transparently about these things that I would rather like chug a gallon of my urine than speak to, especially on, with multiple people. I entered like years of teaching with that, to the point where one day I realized, like, very graciously and gratefully, but that I realized, oh my gosh, whatever just happened today, I'm ready for the next step, because I realized my teacher had said something and I trusted my own languages of intuition over my teacher. And that was the first time that had happened in some years. And I mean, that was the first time it had ever happened since we'd working together.
Was this a spiritual teacher, or was this like
Yeah,
a life?
she was someone who was also,
Okay.
um, she also had different
Experiences.
multidimensional
Yeah.
awareness. Yeah. And so my next instruction came by way of that teacher who said, okay, you're ready. I want you to go onto Facebook and do a live stream and answer questions. And I was like, are you trying to like torture me? Like, what? Like, and if I had not respected her
Mm-hmm.
so much, and I mean, she saved my sanity. Um, I had no idea how that would work. So, but it was like with God, I was like, I knew that was my next instruction. Um, and I did it. I had created already a group on Facebook. I had been nurturing that group. Like, I started that group in 2000. Oh, I started that group immediately. I was like, get on Facebook, start a spiritual group. So I'd been doing that for um, a long time, but I'd never just gone on and been like, yes, ask me anything. That just seemed terrifying to me. And I realized once I did it, that merged with my deep, deep, still black lake of experiential solutions. I also, like, I could offer those, but when it came to channeling, for other people. I didn't know this was going to happen, but I turned on the camera. I told everybody, hey, show up. I'll speak to you. And if you have any questions, I'll channel for you. And what ended up happening was I got my first question and I'm listening and I'm thinking, how am I supposed to know this? I like, as she's asking me this. And then all of a sudden, in my, again, this is not outside, but I see in my head that Sesame Street brick wall where the puppets and the humans used to interact. And all of a sudden, she's heading toward the end of her question. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, I don't know. I'm like thinking, oh my God, what is about to happen right now? And all of a sudden, Edgar Casey, who is known as like America's first psychic, and he was really a famous naturopath. He's also been called like the sleeping prophet because he would enter that hypnagogic state and you could ask him questions while he was in that state and he'd be able to channel the answers. So all of a sudden, I had my lifelong Sesame Street wall. Whenever somebody wants to come and step forward for someone to answer them specifically, like he was there. And in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, thank God. Oh my God, thank God. I love Edgar Casey, you know? And I was like, I'm like, and he did. And that for that first ever question, all of a sudden a mic appeared and the woman finished her question. Edgar Casey hopped off the wall and walked up to the mic and answered the question. And all I had to do was say it out loud. And I was like, oh, thank you. Because I was like, you know, I had no idea. Like, and that from there, you know, that I started a Patreon group. There's like 800 people in it or something. And I would have these sessions where, and I would not answer questions. Like I wanted to answer questions for the highest and best, not like, is Jason gonna break up with me? Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, no, like, no, I'm not Madame Zara, you know, like from the movie Big or something. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, no, like, and I realized like what I was really meant to be communicating was it comes through every single different way. But what I really do is activate the women I work with, their awareness of their eighth chakra, which is called the soul star chakra. And it's like right there. And it's it's intentionally out of the body to be a little bit up and out of the fray. And by the way, Jesus told me, this was like 2 years later, and I was channeling him. He's like, I didn't heal you. He said, we just had to get you up and out of there like long enough and well enough for you to remember.
Okay.
And I was like,
Wow.
and then I was afraid to say that because I thought people are going to be like, oh, I healed myself, you know, but it's like, it's not like that. It was like, that's all of us, like, you know. And so in our soul star, before we enter the body, the most important and relevant information for our soul's desired journey, the most relevant other lifetimes, the most relevant recognition of another person, the orchestrated key triggering events, all of that is stored here. And I actually channeled my own soul star to ask, how does that work? How do you work? And it's so important for us to always be working on like giving ourselves an internal fluff, like keeping our body free of negative energy, like a spiritual enema kind of a thing. Because I understand this now. The soul star dumps all of its information at the exactly right time, right place, but it dumps everything directly into the heart. And then the heart disseminates like through what avenues and magnetizes like through what externally might happen. And I think I used to wonder why, when I knew when I was drinking, that was obvious. I wasn't getting anything. But in my marriage, I wasn't either. And that is because, like I said, I was intentionally tamping down everything intuitive, and my heart did not exist. So, like,
yeah.
my system wasn't there, you know?
Yeah, but so you were working with women, and I guess you were working with women like on Facebook. You had a Patreon page and everything. So you also talked about working with women executives and women in general.
Right.
How well, especially for women. I mean, yes, I mean all women. I guess all people, for that matter, can always use a life coach. But for
I don't
women,
like that word.
yeah.
Like I'm like, yeah,
but
like,
but but for women who are executives
mhm.
specifically, they have the extra challenge because they have to be everything to everyone. And I'm not saying that other women don't have that. Of course they do. But it seems that especially in this society, we have a lot more expectations for women. We have a lot more expectations for women in terms of if you are an executive, you have to know how to completely control the office, the boardroom, and then you come home and then you have your second job being a mother. And with all your experiences, I mean, of course, some of them were not always positive, but with all your experiences, how do you help women executives? What do you have to do spiritually to help those women? Because, like, again, like I said, anybody can sort of give them a very practical approach to what it means to be an executive, or a practical approach to how to get this meeting or how to make this sale and all that. But how do you
Yeah.
help these women use, how should I say, spiritual approach to their everyday work in a big office like a law firm, that sort of thing? How did you help those women through
That's
your
really
business?
beautifully said, by the way.
Yeah.
You really beautifully captured that.
Thank you.
Um, I mean, female executives and CEOs and whatever the title, women who have a lot of responsibility at work, they have almost always had to claw their way up the ladder. And as you can imagine, the more and more that makes you different, the harder and harder that ladder climb is. Um, I know nothing about running a company. I know nothing about what it means to sit on a board. I don't have to. Life coaching is something I think that gets simplified into things like mantras and positive thinking and a 5-year plan. I don't operate at that level. So the first thing I would say is I get so many women who come to me, like you said, they're bereft. They're totally fried. Like keeping up to just keep their position at work. All of the energy it takes to maintain that. Most of them, by the time they get to me, they have tried therapy, life coaching, like the traditional sense.
Yeah, traditional, yeah.
Yes. And the difference with the women I work with is the first thing I say is, it's not your job. It has nothing to do with your job. Nothing about the way you feel and the way you're able to carry yourself in this world right now has to do with your job, with your partner, with your children. That's where the empowerment bit comes in. If it was really connected to someone's job or anything external, we would all be living in a barrel of shit. I mean, we would all necessarily be helpless.
Mm-hmm.
If it really was your job,
Mm-hmm.
then you would be screwed.
Mm-hmm.
Has nothing to do with your job. It has to do with what you have let go of and what you have taken on in order to get where you are. We need to take a look at that.
Mm-hmm.
Each section of your life. I often use the zodiac chart with the 12 houses that literally starts at the first house of self-identity. It goes through every facet of life to the 12th, which is the house of undoing and sacrifice and the unknown and divine connection. That as a tool to survey one's inner and outer landscape is integral because it's so complete. And what we need to do is take piece by piece, relationship by relationship, and calibrate it. Because you're coming here, you are imbalanced on every level, mentally, emotionally, spiritually.
When you're burnt out, yeah? That's, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Everything, like on every level, you have been doing what you thought would get you through and get you to your goal, being CEO, being account manager, whatever it is. We now need to look category by category, relationship by relationship, and see what is not aligned with who you really are. And we need to release that.
Okay.
Then we also need to review everything in the same manner and consciously identify and bring back in what does align to you.
Okay.
And it's kind of like a good metaphor for it would be like Michelangelo used to describe David. You know, he had a huge block of marble. All he had to do was carve off the marble that wasn't David. That's it. Like David was there, whole, perfect already. You just had to get him out of the marble.
Okay.
Just had to get that marble away.
Yeah.
And I have different exercises that I've not me, but my team and God and have come up with to address everything, both external, meaning interpersonal, and most importantly, internal. This is definitely not for the faint of heart, because just like I said, When I began speaking transparently about my experiences, I did lose my friends.
But you know that that often happens though. You know, it's funny because one of the things that yeah, and again we've spoken on this channel about this before, but one of the things that you will notice as you are making, like, you go to the dark night of the soul, and then you're at the rock bottom, and then you sort of work your way up, you sort of rebuild yourself from scratch because you're obviously shattered, and obviously your experience shows points to that, and a lot of people who've also had other experiences definitely point to that, as we talked about. And what often happens is, a, you start to, you know, having a breakdown is actually the part where you make that turning point. That whole thing of having the nervous breakdown. But then on top of it, one thing that people often notice is that they lose their friends, because whoever you were before, you know, especially, and people may not even recognize that they're masking, and that's the thing. You know, you're able to sort of say, well, look, this is what I was doing, I was masking, I was trying to tamp down all this craziness that was happening, I was having like the crazy show. And but often we, as we change, we change our environment, we may lose a partner, we may gain another partner, lose our friends, you know, aspects of our family, and that's part of that whole lay of the land. So it doesn't surprise me that you know, people lose friends. It's just going to happen. But at the same time, to also, and what you're saying, to just sort of you know, to what you're saying is trusting in the process, because it's a process that you know, you trust in, and you say, okay, yeah, I've lost my husband, or I've lost this, that, the other person, and now I have to move on. And it's that rebuilding that I think is really is very powerful. And I can only imagine, especially for people who are executives, like you said, account managers or executives, what that must be like. But would you say, especially now, especially in the last, let's say, maybe 5, 7, maybe 10 years, that compared to, let's say, the 80s, where people were just like, I'm going to sacrifice everything for my job and screw my family, my kids, I'm just going to be the job. Would you say that right now, in to a lesser extent, in the corporate world, people are starting to sort of take their life back and say, look, I want a work life balance. A part of that work life balance is having a spiritual life, having a relationship with my wife or my husband, or having a relationship with my kids, you know, and be
I wish I
damned
could say it.
everything else, you
I
know?
wish I could say yes,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
But I find that, and so much of this is just practical. Like, I've had people say to me, it's wrong for me to charge money, but
Oh,
you gotta eat, you know?
yeah.
And I committed myself wholly to this. And so I need to pay my mortgage, and I need to take care of my children. Uh, in that same way, there is a very practical desperation to these women. And I don't teach them these practices and these ways to self reflect on this particular person, this particular colleague, or this particular trouble with your child. It all is practical. We all need, like in that hierarchy of needs, we all need an income.
Yeah.
We all need we all need shelter, food, water, air. As you go up, you know, therein enters friendship, a sense of tribal community, um, even love. But to be fried, to be frenzied, to feel like you're about to shatter because you've given so much without realizing it almost 100% of the time. It's been a small sacrifice here, another small sacrifice there, another one, a little piece there, a little piece there, until one day it's like an ambush.
Yeah.
But it's a slow process of kind of sacrificing or compromising. And over time, these small accommodations end up with women being
Yeah,
like so fragmented
exactly.
and schismed.
Yeah.
And there is a way, I don't say these things to be, what's the word? Like, I don't say this to be like dramatic, like, ew, but
No,
like,
but
yeah, these changes are seismic, but they're also foundational. So my when I work with a woman, I I want her to stay employed. The things we do are not radical so that she throws everything away, becomes a temp, and moves her family into a tiny apartment and shames herself for have given so many years to her
no,
job. It's
no,
like,
that's silly. No.
no, but if you want to take work, as so many people do, that is the linchpin for so many women, because there are so many, like you said, added layers of societal and internal pressure. Um, Work is its own landscape,
Yeah.
and we take that first internally before we ever start self-reflecting on interpersonal relationships and the options we have about changing our habits and the way we engage and ceasing to react, but rather having our bearings again to the point where we can respond.
Yeah, and you know,
Um,
and I just wanted to sort of just put a little little sort of side note there, sidebar there. Now I know that you work a lot with women, but and I don't want to sort of be this type of person that says, well, you know, men don't suffer too. I mean, obviously they do. I mean, you know, men need life coach like anybody else. But the thing is that it's funny. I was reading something about a survey that had been done, and they said that especially women who are in their 50s, like late 40s, early 50s, what often ends up happening is that women end up being caretakers to their aging parents, and women being end up being caretakers to their children. And
yep.
it's not to say that men don't contribute, or that men themselves, especially if a man is a single parent, they definitely do. But it seems that often, more often than not, and I don't want to sort of turn this into a sort of a gender war. So please don't guys, you know, if you're watching this is not a gender war thing. This is just more numbers. And this, it just seems that women end up having to juggle more of that sort of thing than let's say the guys do. That's just what it is. But again, like I just want to sort of, you know, disclaimer here that, you know, men definitely, you know, need a life coach, or they also give a lot and all that kind of thing, but we're just sort of focusing on this particular part. But
Yes.
it's very important to realize that, you know, when I saw that survey, I thought, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because we do take care of our aging parents, and a lot of times women are really end up straddled with that. But
Yeah.
so I just want to sort of point that out. But moving forward, so like you said, and I like the fact that you said that, you know, you have to be practical. And I remember I'd studied Reiki, and you know, way back when. And I remember the teacher that I had said, you know, you have to make sure that you get paid for your service. And I remember thinking that's kind of, you know, it's very revolutionary, because a lot of times people are expecting, like, you know, well, your Mother Teresa, so, you know, you should give away. And, you
Right.
know, if you see
Right.
someone who's really like desperate and on the street, okay, I'm not going to ask them for bucks. But we have to, and I remember it was about exchange of energy in a way, because it is about of energy as well. So it's also not shaming oneself for saying, yes, I get paid to be a spiritual healer, or yes, I get paid to be a Reiki practitioner, or I get paid for whatever I'm doing. So I think that that's very important to point that out. And I think that also women, well, I mean, maybe changing, but I think for the most part, women never thought to women often don't ask for raises. Women don't often, go after what's, if they've been working hard to say, look, I deserve a raise or I deserve whatever. And I think that women are starting to change that and say, well, yeah, I do, you know, and I should be paid more for what I'm doing. But it's not all about the money. I just wanted to sort of point that out. But for these women now that you're helping, whoops, for these women that you're helping, what are some of the tips? Like, so let's sort of move on into the next part of this and say, well, what kind of tips, if a woman comes into your office, or you meet with a woman and or a person, man or woman, and they say, look, I'm fried, I don't know what to do, and I like my job, but I really would like to have a better relationship with my job. I don't want it to be a chore. What kind of tips and tricks do you offer? Life tips and tricks do you offer to people like that?
No problem. Okay,
Yeah.
I would say the two most fundamental tips that I begin with is, one is a process I made up. It's called moon chaining. And we start with, I mean, this is not the exact first thing we do, but this is a really good exercise for anyone listening. So again, if you're using the zodiac wheel as a tool to make sure that when you're thinking about what I'm about to tell you, that you are comprehensively not leaving out any bit of your life, take that zodiac wheel and write down everyone that comes to mind from each of the houses, because they're all different aspects of your life, of people who you give love to or people who you receive love from. And we go through that life sector by life sector. We look at each single name and we discuss, how is this relationship? Is it calibrated? Are you getting as much as you're giving? Where do you want to be in this relationship? At the root of it, does this person even align with you? I once personally had to divorce a good girlfriend of mine because she began having affairs with married men. And that was so not aligned with my values. I could feel the fraudulence inside of me with continuing to be a close friend, knowing that that was happening. So at that base level, for a woman in particular, women are largely more intuitive. We tend to carry more shame. We tend to find ourselves in almost martyr-like conditions before realizing, wait, this is not good. This is actually hurting and draining myself. So just going through and doing that exercise, that moon chaining exercise, and like double checking from the bottom up, like, does this person even align with who I really am? And let's say they don't. What are the ways that we're going to adjust your actions and your thinking to get it to where you are creating a relationship that does align with you? And that could be your boss. That could be your child. But we take everything so seriously, and we might be pouring or hemorrhaging energy into friendships or coworkers, that if we really took our values out and set them on a table, it would look like a zebra compared to like an orange.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what am I doing, hemorrhaging energy for this person in these ways when we're not even actually fundamentally aligned? With a boss, for example, of course, you're always going to carry courtesy, you'll always carry honesty, but there are ways to change your own behavior to where you feel like you are honoring yourself instead of contorting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that alone, that step of evaluating every relationship in which you are supposedly receiving love or supposedly giving love, just reviewing those alone and making adjustments can really change your quality of life.
Wow.
That's one.
That's really that's really powerful. Do you sometimes in your work with the people you work with, do you also help them to get closer to their own empathic abilities? Like, have you ever helped anybody to say, okay, I mean, obviously you're someone who has a very, very latent gift, and you're somebody who's, been having these experiences all their life. And from what I heard, your guides are always there. Sometimes you choose to listen, sometimes you don't. And so maybe there's that as well. But is in part of your being the rogue yogi and being the life coach that you are, is there also a part of the service that you offer? Is that part in terms of helping them to hear their guides and to hear who they can connect to, like they can draw resources from? How
That's
would
the
you feel that?
most fundamental part of the work I do.
Okay.
That is the most important channel into which we pour our energy. And immediately, I have every woman I work with do this with me over, the computer together. Is I'm like, look, it's time for you to meet and best friend your higher self, like yesterday. Okay, because that is you. Your soul is much greater than the bit of it embodied in this little skin envelope. And that is the place. That's the point of view. And that person, capital S Silver, along with whatever your beliefs are, that's who I want steering the car, not human Silver who has just gone through the ringer. I want guidance with a capital G. And that can only come through becoming like you would somebody with skin on it, becoming very intimate with your higher self. And we start with an exercise. A lot of women have never meditated. Many times they say, it's not for me. I can't sit still. I meditate while exercising. And that's beautiful. I understand there is a peace that comes from that. But the only way to really make sense of an intimate relationship and to be able to get to hear and sense and be guided by your higher self, it must be done in silence. And so I have the woman sit on the floor and we do straight back, like envisioning hanging by string. And I have them, I'm just going to pretend like I'm working with you.
Yeah, sure.
I'd say, okay, Crystal, I want you to be totally relaxed, but technically hanging off your spine. And your spine is like a flagpole. And I want you to just sit And I want you to say, whenever you're ready, higher self, when I next say go, please flood my body and my field 100% with your presence. Please make yourself known to me as boldly and in as many ways as possible at a level of like a neon, like billboard. And then I'll say, okay, that's what you're going to say. And you can say it out loud or in your head, but let's relax before you do this, because before you say this, I want you to feel what you're feeling right now, because you're going to contrast it with what happens through all of your senses when you next say go. And from that exercise, we then get into a yes and a no. Guidance from our higher selves. And from a yes and a no, it is up to the woman, but it's built into the program every step of the way, because it is the woman who is doing the work. That conversation blooms far beyond a yes and no. Typically, the women I work with end up having one or two latent abilities. We attract each other. And understanding them, making the best use of them, understanding how and why you don't need to fear them, working with them, allowing them to infuse your intuition and be a part of your guidance. If that is the case, which I have yet to work with someone who is at not a minimum an empath.
Okay.
So in the process, that is 100% covered. It's just not the first fundamental thing we do, but it is something we do thoroughly into completion, no matter what their mode of multidimensional awareness is.
And you know, what's interesting is that I know it sounds kind of like, oh, a yes or a no, that kind of thing. But it's interesting because I think that there are a lot of decision making that we have to do in our day-to-day lives, especially in our jobs. And having someone on your side and someone saying, you giving you a yes or no might actually be helpful, because some people say, you know, like, I don't know what to do with my life. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do this. And having someone with having that connection is really quite helpful. And I know this sounds kind of bizarre, but it happens to me a lot where I'm in my job and I need something. I'll say, you know, I really need to have information about, you know, like, for example, I want to book actually, I do want to book a vacation coming up. And I said, you know, I really would like to find out what's happening with Via Rail or stuff like that. And the next thing you know, the Via Rail email pops into my email, or the person that I really want to speak to comes to me, and the information, and the thing is that it's not like I was talking about it, or you know, I was typing it in a search. No, like I was really looking for something so obscure, something else, but so obscure and so weird. And yet somehow I will get a mail, or I'll see a commercial on TV, or I'll see something in my inbox in my email, and I'm like, oh my God, you know, like, really, you know. But I've said that too, and I followed what you're saying, and I've spoken with my higher self, and I said, look, you know, I would really like you to help me and work with me, because I need help. And I want to be clear though, because some people, when they think about their higher selves or you know, spirit guides, they think of Hollywood, and they think about this Hollywood thing where there's like lights and all kind of stuff going on. And it could be, because I know that, for example, for you, your experiences were much more vivid. But you know, there are a lot of people who get information, and it's very subtle. And I think that is
Yep.
really, you have to be subtle, because yes, if you're silver, you may get the, you know, the whole, you know, orbs and the, you know, the portals and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't happen for everybody, but you know, some people do get that. But I think for the most part, people get just like subtle messages. It'll just come to you, and it'll just come into your head, and it's just sort of like, oh my God, that's true. You know, that, yeah, that's the kind of the answer that I'm looking for.
So true.
And you know what I mean? And so it's, I think it's just so interesting what you're saying, because it's always there. It's just that we sometimes we feel the need to, sometimes we need something else to show us the way, as it were, which is what I think you're doing. You know, you're showing people the way to listen to
Showing
themselves.
people to
Yeah.
actually help them realize
Yeah.
they're co-creating their answers the whole
Exactly.
time. I'm just helping them be able to hone in
Yeah.
and notice it, like you say,
Yeah.
to then make use of it, because it is happening. We are constantly co-creating with our higher selves. And one of the best places to capture intuitive thoughts in the world that everybody has access to is the toilet. Okay, when you
What?
are on the toilet, you are just enough, like on autopilot, just enough of your personality,
Wow.
your ego is engaged in, like, okay, bladder open, I need to pee, that the rest of your landscape is wide open. And so just enough of you is engaged in something that's just like a no thought activity. And then boom, you'll be like, oh yeah. And you'll just have a thought. Or while you're showering, or while you're driving, or oh my God, when I fold my laundry, I'm like, I could write a book after I folded my laundry. You
Yeah.
know, it's moments where like you're a bit on autopilot and your ego is a little bit engaged and out of the way, just a little
Yeah.
bit.
That's it.
But the rest is so wide open that both your higher self and your guides will often, you know, quote, and I don't mean this, I just mean like you'll get inspiration during those moments.
Yeah.
You'll think of something, or
Yeah.
you'll have an idea, or you'll, you know, notice. If you want to start noticing right now, take those autopilot moments and just kind of like be present.
Okay. So I guess if I work on it, I can become the toilet yogi. I don't know. I did.
No, no, you,
I'm
like,
being silly, but like I mean, but it makes sense. You're right, because you're just sort of sitting there
toilet is
like, no,
insane.
no, no, and there you go. But I think I'll opt for the shower yogi instead. I'll leave it at
Right.
that. TMI.
No, I have like no boundaries with TMI. I just try to be like, I don't try to keep it a little bit tucked
Yeah,
in,
keep
but
it, you know. But so in terms of in terms of where did you get this term, the rogue yogi? Who came up with that? Was that you, or was that, how did that
no,
happen?
it, um, okay. Well, let's see. Actually, I was involved this summer in a terrible situation that ended me up having to help the FBI, as I showed you on my phone when we
Yeah.
spoke earlier. But out of that situation and out of that absolute
Sorry, can I just cut you off just for just 1 second? I'm so sorry, guys. If you because we're sort of nearing the end, and I just wanted to sort of see if
Yeah,
anybody wanted to ask any questions, to
definitely.
put it in the live chat. So I know it's a bit late, but if you do have some questions, like your whole story, like Silver's story has been so riveting. I just been sitting there like, oh. But if you have some questions or about
Yeah.
but maybe Silver can answer, or maybe she could do a quick sort of like intuitive thing. If you have any questions, guys, put them in the live chat, and we'll ask her before we finish up. So sorry to cut you off, but I just wanted to sort of put that in
No,
there.
not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. And I really actually do want to say, please do leave questions, um, especially about your development and your soul purpose and such. It's it's best for me to it's best for me to have a photo of you because I am so visual. Um, I just want to put that out there. But I also really want to take any questions on any part of my story, whether it's about the extraterrestrials, being with God, growing up as a psychic child, anything. I'm entirely open per my direct eyeball to eyeball promise to God. So definitely please don't hold back if you do have any questions. But I had a terrible, terrible dark night of the soul this summer. The only good thing that came out of it was the name Rogue Yogi. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So and well, I guess you're the rogue because you're doing things a little bit different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like, that is it. And because I've been looking for a name that suits me, that doesn't speak to organized religion, and that also honors, like, my guys are like, you are not allowed to use the word weird. Like, we banish that from your vocabulary. You're not weird. You're just early. And like I would have fights. Like, I would be like channeling with Jesus, and I'd be like, I am so weird. Are you kidding me? Look at me. Like, no one like knows what to do with me. My own dad says I scare him. Um, so I wanted to honor that, like, yes, my experiences are incredibly, as Jesus would say, statistically in the minority. Um, I did want to honor that about myself, but not in a disparaging way, not with the word weird, for example. And I do consider myself a yogi. Uh, I don't go to yoga, but I do consider myself a yogi in terms of it being my entire life. I practice as a yogi. I do certain positions and such, but I'm not talking about like Lululemon and
No,
green
but you
shoes,
meditate. So like I mean,
but like the different arms of spirituality. And uh, there's a lot to trying to live in divine union and divine remembrance 24/7. But that is my goal, and my promise is to speak openly about it, which I do.
okay. Well, you know what? I think we're going to leave it at that because I think that we've covered so much ground, and I know it's a bit late for some people, but I just wanted to say that this has been one of the more riveting presentations I've had on this show. It's absolutely stunning, and you have and can I just share something with you, Silver, which is going to sound strange, but I want to share with
Please
you
do
because
it.
I am an empath and I do see things. And I mean, I've brought it up here and there on the show, but I never really went into it. But during your whole presentation, I saw your aura was pure white light, absolutely pure white light. And what's interesting is when you were talking about your experiences, your aura was very, very bright and vivid white. And then the minute you started talking about just basic business, it actually kind of like it got kind of like It's and I'm not saying in a negative way. I'm just saying it's interesting
So
that
practical.
when you came
Like,
down and you were talking just business and women and business,
right.
it actually kind of just almost shrank and almost kind of went away. It was very interesting. So I said, "Look at that!" And I said, "I'm looking at you, and I'm looking around. I'm thinking, but how come I don't see it? Whereas I saw it before, especially when you were first starting to talking." And so I just found that kind of
Yeah.
interesting. So it's interesting. I do have here. I do have a comment here from Hybridor. The comment here: a lot of star seeds seem to have experienced narcissistic abuse that has left us in not in relationships this lifetime to focus on our inner development. Do you feel like this? Did you want to answer
Oh my
that?
gosh.
Yeah. Where do you
A
begin?
narcissist and an empath are like toxic nuclear peanut butter and jelly. And the energetic draw there, why it happens so often, is because if before I understood what an empath was, I did not know I actually had to practice energetic hygiene. Like we talked about this before, like
Yeah.
sometimes if all of a sudden we're overcome with an emotion out of the blue, when that happens, immediately I now know to say, like, body, is this mine? Because so often it's not. And by doing that, when I say that, it'll evaporate. But this is the thing, an empath who doesn't know they're an empath, which is most empaths,
Yeah.
or they've been told, but they think that it just means they're nice or kind. It's so much more than that. Energetically, we have so much to us. We are the skeleton keys that can bridge to any consciousness. And that is a life saving superpower. But if we don't know this, then we're walking around bleeding. Like I can energetically, I can see it. It looks like a hemorrhage. Narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths, they do not have they have almost the inverted energetic profile that we have. So they need to get that heart energy from another.
Because they're empty. Because
They do
they're
not
bereft of
have
all
it
of that.
in.
Okay.
Some of them actually, psychopathy is a spectrum. So there are some who, they're rare, but who do recognize themselves and want to get help, and they can actually change, but that's very rare. Typically, they stay unaware or like knowingly unaware, and they continue to lure in people like us with blooming heart energy. It's just like the perfect vampiric storm. But if you allow it to be, it can also be like your spiritual launch point. If you allow yourself to see the relationship for what it really was or is, and you can see how you were in the relationship while acknowledging how the other person was. And to my point earlier, if you can reach forgiveness, you are literally raising the frequency of the whole collective. Like the act of forgiveness, and especially for women, for self-forgiveness,
It's hard for some women.
so powerful.
Yeah, it's hard for some women to be forgiving of
So
themselves.
hard.
Yeah.
I mean, we carry so, it's like a tendency of like to carry like shame or disappointment in oneself, or like we're not measuring up enough, well enough. We're not doing. We have many roles, and I'm not fulfilling this role in my life well enough, whatever that means, and that's like, again, like getting to that centered place within yourself, like being comfortable with your shortcomings and your choices, and being like, I'm not going to allow like rage to live within me. I'm going to make it a point to purposely pursue forgiveness, things like that. And those relationships, when conscientiously and spiritually worked upon by an empath, can absolutely transform that empath's life.
Wow. That is absolutely incredible. Wow. Thank you so much, Silver, for being with us this evening. It is absolutely stunning. This is one of the more intense, presentations that we've had, and like I said, it's been such a pleasure meeting you, and I just absolutely love everything that you're doing. So thank you so much for imparting your wisdom from your life. I mean, obviously, it was a very hard school of hard knocks, but you've come out the other side, and you are amazing, and just that much more of an amazing person to have come out on the other side. And for that, I give you your flowers. And so I also wanted to say that if I think the next time we meet, Silver, we'll be doing more of we'll be talking more about astral travel and connection with higher beings. And later in the fall, we'll be having Silver come back again and doing basically some question and answer through channeling. I think it's what we talked about. So if you have any questions, you can come back either on May 28th or later on in the fall, and we'll have Silver again. But for now, I just wanted to say thank you, Silver, for being with us this evening and for sharing such intimate details of your journey with us, and for allowing us to come with you along this journey at this point, and to learn so much. And I'm sure that a lot of the people that you work with truly admire and appreciate all that you've done for them, because you've taken everything that you've been through, the dark nights of the soul, and have given so much of yourself, and not in a negative way, because we were talking about giving too much, no, but in terms of giving the lessons and sharing those lessons with people is very, very beautiful and touching. So I just want to say thank you. And to our audience, thank you for being with us here tonight. I think we're coming up on Easter, so if you're celebrating Easter, happy Easter to all of you guys. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Please like, and please subscribe. It really helps us, and we're trying to grow the channel, so I'd really appreciate it. And as well, I've put in the information below in the video, Silver's contact information, so you can check out her website and drop her a line. Why not? And we will be seeing you again next week. So I wanted to say thank you again, Silver, for being with us this evening. You're absolutely a beautiful, beautiful, angelic being. And I know that you probably didn't feel that way at the beginning, but you definitely are. And I'm truly grateful to be in your presence. So thank you so much. And thank you to everybody being here tonight. And we will see you next week. Okay? So hang in there. And take care.